Security, of course, is the task, I would say, of our times, and this internal security strategy that we're presenting today to you is, I would say, our blueprint for protecting Europeans in a more dangerous world. The goal of this security strategy, the goal of this Protect EU, as we call it, is not only to develop a new joined-up approach to internal security, but also to create a new mindset, a new security mindset. And we live in a new era, I would say, a new era of threats, of security threats, and our enemies are not met on an open battlefield, but they hide in the shadows of our financial systems and in the dark, also in the dark corners of the web. So our policy, of course, must be always able to match this. And we need to start thinking about security in everything we do. Concretely, this means a security check on all our initiatives, always asking the question, how can this proposal we're going to deliver enhance the safety of our citizens? And we need to act together as a society at all different levels. Providing security is the job of the government, yes, but everyone has to play a role in it. The private sector, the communities, the citizens, of course, and all need to be made aware, actually, of their role. And to be very clear on that, staying prepared and ready also for whatever the future holds, I think is the best way for us to keep actually enjoying our lives, of course, and the opportunities that are ahead of us. So, honorable members, to come to the substance also of the strategy, Europol just published their assessment on serious and organized crime called the SOCTA a few weeks ago, and it actually makes for eye-opening reading, I would say. Criminal networks are becoming more sophisticated, we know that, than ever before, and many operate inside the European Union, but run remotely from outside, from third countries. They recruit children who are under the age of criminal responsibility and often unable to actually understand the seriousness of their involvement, to act as helpers on the one hand, as dealers on the other hand, but even as assassins. And too many people in vulnerable positions are abused by networks of human traffickers. But I'm very confident that Europe, of course, has the right answers. And under this strategy, under Protect EU, we will take the fight to the criminals on every front. We will come forward with a massive upgrade to Europol. We will strengthen its mandate with the necessary oversight and provide also the member states with the level of support they need, and exactly also where, of course, they need this support. And, which is also very important, we will follow the money. For example, by pushing forward the implementation of the new rules for money laundering. We will also give law enforcement stronger tools for investigations like undercover operations, but also Crown Witness programs. And that's perhaps even more importantly, we will tackle the issue of better access to data. That is very important in that respect, to give the police the tools they actually need to prevent on the one hand, but also to prosecute on the other hand. And Protect EU will take a determined approach, but also a careful approach on that. Organized criminals are more, as I said that before, are more international than ever before. So we must also, of course, be international by ramping up our engagement with third countries through new partnerships, new security partnerships, with our partners. Even I would say going beyond partnerships, we want to pursue a sort of new kind of security diplomacy, meaning that the EU's security concerns will be on the table in all our dealings with third countries, whether that has to do with trade or whether that has to do with visa facilitation or development in all the dealings we have. The threat of terrorism is also on the rise, and as instability continues, just to give an example, of course, in the Middle East, but also elsewhere, we need new tools to stop radicalized individuals from, I would say, slipping through our borders, and to stop hateful content from radicalizing our youth here at home. And under Protect EU, Frontex, of course, will have an important role to play on the external border, and we will be tripling its manpower over time. I was mentioning the tensions in the Middle East. They're also creating, I would say, new divisions between our religious communities in Europe. We are seeing a shocking rise in anti-Semitism, and at the same time more widespread anti-Muslim hatred. And the European Union, in my opinion, cannot tolerate neither. Protecting the EU also means protecting every European's right to practice his or her religion in peace, and to do so also in an open manner. That will remain an active part of the Protect EU strategy, and I think that's where we really feel very strongly about. The use also of hybrid strategies puts I would say, the internal cohesion and also the resilience of our societies, of course, to the test, and some of the most serious hybrid threats to the security and safety of people in Europe take place online. So new technologies provide new tools also for influencing our society, and we need to hold tech companies to account when it comes to online content that is hateful, that is criminal, and that actually also radicalizes our youth. So protecting children is the most essential duty of any society, I would say, and we must win the fight against child sexual abuse once and for all. And that takes us also back to the topic of data access, to how easy it is right now for sexual predators to hide their crimes in the dark corners of cyberspace. So, honourable members, as you have seen, Protect EU has a high level of ambition. Never in the history of the European Union have so many new initiatives in the area of security policy, of course, been put on the table, and I'm asking for your support on all these initiatives, which I know are, I would say, a shared concern for all of us. And because although we no longer have the I would say, luxury of taking our security for granted, we do have one important advantage, and because the threats we are facing also bring us closer together as Europeans. They remind us actually of our unity, of everything that unites us in Europe, and they give us a sense also of common purpose. And I'm very much convinced that we will retain that sense of common purpose, that we will be able also to protect against these new threats, and that we will emerge stronger than we are before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And tagad vārds Eiropas Tautas partijas grupas vārdā Tomas.
And now Thomas Tobé from PPE, 2 minutes.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Europe is facing major threats to our internal security. Organized crime is on the rise. Hostile state actors are attacking our critical infrastructure, and sometimes migration is weaponized at our external borders. This is why the EPP has called for a European Security Pact to protect our citizens. We welcome that the Commission is now taking crucial steps, because this will be needed now to make Europe safe, but also safe for future generations. The new internal security strategy sends a clear signal that Europe will defend itself against threats, foreign and domestic. And it's also a clear signal to EU citizens that safety needs to be a top priority, because without security there is no freedom. And now we must also move from words and also make sure that we deliver on the content of this strategy. And I can assure you, Commissioner, that EPP is fully committed to achieve this. We will push in this House to make sure that Europe steps up the fight against organised crime, that we tackle illegal migration, and that we protect ourselves against hybrid threats. And to make it clear, we want a union for citizens, not for criminals. Thank you.
Paldies.
Thank you. For SND, Birgit Sippel, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. In 2020, the Commission presented its last strategy for internal security. At that time, we were at the very beginning of the corona pandemic. It seemed as though a Russian war of aggression against Ukraine was unthinkable, and this huge number of hybrid threats could hardly be imagined, and the destruction of democracy with the second administration of Donald Trump, it seemed like an evil dystopia. So quite a lot has happened after that time. So this comes at a very timely moment. Even the needs of people for security has been strengthened by the fact that there's so much insecurity and social exclusion. But still, we should not allow ourselves to be driven by fear, uncertainty, or simplistic ideas. Because, on the contrary, recall that the European Court of Justice said in 2014 they declared the data retention directive for null and void. So now we have to have sustainable solutions in conformity with fundamental rights. And we need to look at actual security lapses and rationally analyze the challenges we face. And to do so, we have to look at fighting organized crime and protecting sensitive infrastructure. We have to have protection against natural and environmental disasters. And the fight against extremism and terrorism, even though people don't want to hear it, most of the politically motivated crimes committed in Germany were actually done by the far right. And you also have to have protection against hate crimes. You have to prevent women from suffering from femicide. You have to protect girls. All of this has to belong to the security policy, because all of these things threaten our security. Only by addressing all of these matters can we really give our citizens confidence.
Thank you. Fabrice Leggeri from PFE, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. The European Commission today is presenting its internal security strategy. Fighting terrorism is a part of this strategy. Therefore, Brussels should set an example by finally, once and for all, stopping, as Marine Le Pen has been asking for years, to provide European funds to organizations close to the Muslim Brotherhood. Radical Islam kills, injures, and psychologically harms thousands of our fellow citizens and across Europe, and it should not be subsidized by the European Union. Brussels must stop playing into the ideological hands of Islamists. On March 29th, the Collective Against Islamophobia in Europe, the new name of the CCIF, an organization that is banned in France, shared a video of the European Commissioner, Ms. Labib. Now, this was possible only because the Commissioner was reiterating exactly word for word the rhetoric of the Muslim Brotherhood. Finally, instead of trying to distribute migrants across the EU, as the Pact for Asylum and Migration provides for. Brussels should instead pressure third countries to take back their legal nationals that are present in our country. Failing this, the European Union will become the main accomplice to those who try to.
Thank you. ECR, Asita Kanko. 1 minute, please.
Shootings in Brussels, threats in our ports, drugs in our schools, illegal migration and modern slavery in our cities, rape crimes even in daytime. Organized crime knows no boundaries, and criminals too often are still outfoxing us. They use borders, busy trade routes and technology to hide their activities. I welcome the awareness that started emerging in recent years, particularly strong awareness among the so-called coalition of the willing, including Belgium, the Netherlands and Germany. These countries must continue to take the lead, but the problems must also be heard and tackled more widely within the European and global frameworks through what you call security diplomacy. Dear Commissioner Brunner, I, as a MEP and chair of the police intergroup and as a mother, I greatly appreciate that this Commission is working so hard to change the mindset and build international agreements. This strategy is an important step, and it gives hope. Also to our police forces. To them, I would like to say today, thank you, and we shall help you.
Thank you. For Renew, Malik Azmani, 1 minute, please.
Commissaris Brunner.
Commissioner, dear colleagues, the world around us is becoming increasingly difficult, and the war in Ukraine demonstrates that our security is threatened from the outside. And to that extent, it's good that we have a new strategy in place which we can use to respond quickly and jointly to hybrid threats. However, if you look at those threats, let me emphasize that we have to remain alert vis-a-vis what's happening within our own borders, because organized crime is increasing both in the Netherlands and the EU. This puts enormous pressure on our way of life. Criminal networks have become more brazen, more violent, more international. A European approach is needed. Also concerning drugs, because stricter controls in one port simply leads to more smuggling in another port. I would like to hear from the European Commissioner as to what he tends to do so. Rolling out a European port strategy is urgently needed. I would like to thank the Commissioner. I'm very motivated to work together with a safer Europe and then a safer Netherlands.
Yes,
Thank you. For the Greens, Saskia Brickman, please.
La sécurité. Security is an issue of concern for all of us, and this is why it is very fortunate that the Commission is taking a look at this and has submitted its strategy today. But guaranteeing the internal security of the European Union requires an ever more systemic approach, from prevention to police resources, investigation, justice, right up to sanctions and rehabilitation. Not to forget socio-economic responses as well. In the face of organised crime, guaranteeing the security of our citizens means that we need a strong social security to guarantee everybody decent living conditions that prevent precarity, which allows criminals to recruit ever younger children and vulnerable people. Guaranteeing security in the face of organised crime means we have to fight effectively against corruption, money laundering, which feed the criminal networks. Guaranteeing the security of our citizens is to fight against Islamist terrorism, just like that of the far right. We have to re-establish truth when it comes to those who are responsible for violence, and with the same aim, i.e. to destabilise our democracies, spreading fear amongst our citizens so that they will accept policies which undermine liberty and freedoms and generalised surveillance. Guaranteeing security also means that when it comes to climate change and some of the recent victims of this are best placed to know that they need more protection against the elements, and guaranteeing security also means that we have to put an end to environmental crime, illegal holdings, pollution, the third main criminal activity around the world. So, in a nutshell, the list is very long, but I think we need the responses from the European Commission to ensure that global security respects human rights, respects democracy, and we also.
Groups vārdā runās Giuseppe.
Thank you. For the left, Giuseppe Antocci. 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Commissioner Brunner, for the crucial work that is carried out. Now, the new European internal security strategy is a fundamental step forward to fight organized crime that saps the security of citizens and the integrity of our economies. I welcome the proposal to use Europol and transform it into an operative agents that would have funds and tools that are innovative for cross-border investigations. Moreover, Eurojust would allow for a judicial cooperation that is swifter and would assist the EPPO and the new anti-money laundering authority, meaning that there would be cooperation with Europol and Eurojust. Moreover, the legislative proposal for 2026 to modernize the rules on organized crime must identify mafia organizations. Without this recognition, the tools that are provided for in the strategy could be weakened. We need courage and determination. Only in this way will we be able to fight and win against the mafia. Thank you.
Thank you. For ESN, Mary Khan. 1 minute, please.
What the Commission is presenting as a strategy, security strategy, is just old news. More power for Brussels, less responsibility in the hands of the national states. And Mr. Brunner, you have said that you're talking about a new reality. However, this new reality, is something we made ourselves. Open borders, mass migration, and imported terrorism. Instead of protecting our borders, you just come up with these technocratic plans and try to talk about cooperation. Critical infrastructure, make it safe, yes, nationally, but not with just phrases from Brussels. We don't need a prepared alliance. We need sovereignty and control of our own borders. And yes, you're talking about terrorism and attacks as a problem of men. But in Hungary and women, there are also automobiles and men. And right now, this balance of they don't have any Islamic attacks because they support the protection of their borders.
Thank you. Jarno Lenes, 1 minute and a half.
EPP stands for a Europe that protects its citizens. You cannot have freedom or prosperity without security. And Europeans overwhelmingly agree with this. Over 2/3 of European citizens support a stronger EU role in security. They also see security as the main area where the EU should act. And with the launch of today's strategy, the European Commission puts security at the core of its agenda, and rightly so. Criminal networks operate across borders, so must our response. Better cooperation and enforcement, effective communication between member states, transforming Europol into an operational agency alongside stronger mandates for Eurojust and Frontex. All this is vital to addressing security challenges. And let me highlight some specific ones. A society that cannot protect its children is a society that has no future. And yet we see child sexual abuse increasing. We need to really step up our fight to protect our children. Some proposals are already on the table, and we need to adopt them ASAP. In border regions like my own, criminals exploit borders to continue their crimes. Strengthening administrative cooperation next to law enforcement and judicial cooperation is necessary and will ensure that criminals will no longer hide behind borders. And thirdly, strengthening the fight against migrant smuggling and human traffickers by criminal gangs who often are also involved in other crimes is an absolute priority. To conclude, the Commission has taken a key step to safeguard our citizens, but words alone won't do. We need decisive, ambitious action, and you can count on the EPP. Thank you.
Thank you. Thijs Ruiten, a minute and a half, please.
Voorzitter, collega's.
President, dear colleagues, Mr. Commissioner, defense. We're going to be spending millions on this, but that's not sufficient for security because it's also linked to this. because with the weak points in defense, well, we don't have waterproof defense. It's the case that we have not been familiar with this strategy up until now, but at this time, there's a theoretical model for our citizens. Of course, it's possible to have cyber attacks. Organized crime, of course, is something which is linked to the same foreign actors. So a well-functioning society is being actively undermined. We're becoming vulnerable. And as you said, the Commissioner, our internal cohesion is at risk. So I think if you have security as the dominating topic, then our citizens lose focus on what's also important. But we can't just always be frightening our citizens, but we have to build their confidence and say we're going to have a robust strategy. That's what we need.
Thank you. Jorge Bujade Villalaba, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Sabah, Franklin, Nassim, Abdelkader, Salah, Younes, Karim. This is the list of the proper names of those who were arrested one evening in Barcelona, my city. An order was given to the police to denounce the Vox spokesperson of announcing this reality in a press conference. The streets of Europe are not safe. The mafias who traffic human beings, flood our streets with drugs, rapes, attacks, machete attacks, and jihadist drivers ploughing into pedestrians. Very often, the reports of these crimes hide the nationality of the criminals. The police don't have the necessary means and resources to tackle crime because the socialist coalition has turned the victims into perpetrators, the perpetrators into victims. So we need political and moral rearmament. We have to combat crime with everything at our disposal. We need higher sanctions, bringing down the age of criminal responsibility, greater police presence, and mass deportations. That we have to reestablish peace and we have to reestablish order. That's the only possible strategy.
Alessandro Ciriani,
Thank you, Alessandro Ciriani, 1 minute.
Commissioner Brunner, we welcome the new European internal security strategy. It is a crucial step forward to be effective in fighting complex threats and that are changing constantly. Frontex and Europol, this is a necessary step. For too long, Europe took on crises with not enough tools. They weren't able to act swiftly and determinedly to the challenges of our time. Terrorism, organized crime, trafficking human beings, all of these require a solid strategy and strengthened cooperation amongst member states. Nonetheless, we must avoid a mistake, taking an emergency policy and one that is dictated by fear. We shouldn't build on alarm, but a strategic approach. We must deal with threats firmly. We should strengthen our external borders, fight illegal migration, and protect our citizens. That means that we need to be decisive in fighting organized crime that uses the weaknesses of our system and fight hybrid threats. Commissioner, the EU must show that it is strong and be able to rise to the challenges it faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Moritz Körner. 1 minute, please.
Colleagues, Commissioner, thank you very much for this security strategy. More cooperation to fight terrorism, organized crime, and cyber attacks. Of course, that's the right approach. My colleague from the EPP, you said without any security, you don't have freedom. However, if you give up freedom in order to achieve security, at the end of the day, you're going to lose everything. And so that's why our fight for more security has to have clear guidelines. We can't have mass surveillance towards our citizens. We can't have mass violations of our fundamental rules. We have to have a smart rule of law security. You want to have better policing instead of simply the storage of data and surveillance of that data. So we can't have the freedom of expression limited. Yes, we want Europol to be stepped up, But we want to support our police, strengthen our police, but we have to ensure that we have more security, but not a violation of freedom.
From Mr. Lucas Zipper. Okay, so floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much that you've accepted this blue card. I do essentially agree with what you've said, but I do have one question. You said no mass surveillance, but at the same time, more digital police work. So where does the difference lie between mass surveillance and digital police work? If we want to allow the police to work digitally, then we will have to accept certain surveillance, including the social media networks.
Thank you very much for that question. I'm happy to answer it. I think that the difference is the following. Then we have offline surveillance and move it into online surveillance. Then we throw everything overboard. And so that's what. If I have a suspicion to start a investigation, that's one thing. But we can't just have mass surveillance where there's no presumption of innocence. That's the difference. So if we have digital competence of our police and improve them and have investigations in specific cases, that's one thing. But if we have mass surveillance with AI, well, then I'm against that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lena Dupont, a minute and a half, please.
Thanks, President. Commissioner, when we look at the area of freedom, security and justice from 1999, we've come a long way. We'd overcome hurdles administratively, but most importantly, sometimes mentally. We increased cross-border cooperation, we built the agencies, we beefed them up on mandates, on staff, on resources, on the tasks. We aligned important policies in order to have full leverage to the outside world. But somehow during the process, we, but more prominently the member states, lost ambition. While criminals, like threats, like malicious actors, did not. Cynically enough, time has come to once again step up on security. So the strategy of today is more than a strategy. It's a promise to keep Europe safe. It's an illustration of a security governance that is fit for purpose and time, including information and intelligence gathering and sharing, feeding into a clear situational picture, innovative and thriving capabilities and businesses, agencies that are strong and well coordinated from border protection to critical infrastructure, to cyber, to law enforcement, and to the judiciary side. The fight against organized crime, radicalization, and terroristic threats. The tasks are numerous. So to the member states, let's be ambitious. That requires strength, that requires courage, and it needs to match the stakes. The most important promise that we can give to our citizens is their safety. To the Parliament, we need to adapt and arrive into the new security landscape on content and on procedures. And altogether, let's do what is needed to serve the European Union, our citizens, our way of life. This is no time to shy away. This is no time to close our eyes. On with courage and determination. Thanks.
Juan Fernando Lopez.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Juan Fernando Lopez Aguilar.
Thank you, President. Comisario Brunner.
Commissioner Brunner, security of the EU has an external dimension that we've talked about much, but now we're talking about internal security with this strategy that should take over for the one that we have in place, and this will happen in 2026. Now, there are some tools that might be interesting. We've been talking about advocating for this for a long time, the operative cooperation of Europol and Eurojust to get better results. Second, it's clear that we have a plan to fight drug and arms. Why not implement, enforce criminal law against arms that we in the Parliament have advocated for? And then negotiations must be concluded to guarantee protection of juveniles in sexual harassment online. And first and foremost, we need to fight terrorism, not just the root causes of financing, propaganda online, and the spreading thereof, and the radicalization that feeds into that. And of course, digital infrastructure. Digital information so that we can protect our critical communications. But none of this would be complete without the importance of fighting any type of hate speech, anti-Semitism, racism, any hate that feeds into crime and violence, because without that, we won't be able to complete our internal security structure. Thank you.
The next speaker is Petra Steger for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I have to ask you what you're doing here, because right now we find out that you are responsible for one of the big finance disaster of the Second Republic in Austria, and you basically bankrupted Austria, and you had a 4.7% deficit. And now you're supposed to be responsible for our security and have this top job. And so thank you very much for all the ruins that have been left there. Now, if you had any dignity, you would resign immediately. So instead, you're presenting a security strategy without even having a strategy. There's no documents, there's no data, there's no figures, just announcements. And so instead of ensuring security, you're just basically putting everyone under suspension, and you just want a suspicion, and you just want to have censorship in the fight against organized crime. Of course, that means censoring TikTok and social media, and then every year millions of illegal people are crossing our borders and with terrorism and radicalists. And how can you really be a migration and when after your example?
Next speaker, Mariusz Kaminski.
Panie komisarzu,
Commissioner, you have submitted a document today which includes certain interesting ideas, but the Commission has already adopted a similar strategy, only later to contradict these actions. The disastrous migration policy has considerably weakened the security of Europeans. The doors have been opened wide to criminal gang smugglers and terrorists. Today, so you talk of strengthening the borders using Frontex officials. Are you aware that instead of supporting the guards protecting the borders of Lithuania with Belarus against Lukashenko, the Frontex officials are acting almost like left-wing NGOs and have been sending reports which are undermining the actions of the border guards? You talk about having to fight hybrid threats. Do you know that the European Commission has criticised Poland for arresting a GRU agent posing as a journalist, Pavel Rubtsov? You say that our various services need to use modern tools because the criminals and our enemies are using these. Are these the kind of messages that have been coming out of Brussels up to now? Well, no. I agree that there is a need to step up and intensify cooperation in the fight against cross-border organised crime. But there are many threats that can be detected by tackling, but...
Next speaker, François-Xavier Bellamy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Commissioner. Well, not very far from here, in a city on the outskirts of Paris, in Saint-Ouen, the parents of children are going to have to decide whether or not they're going to move the classes from a primary school because drug traffic has made life so dangerous and impossible for their children that they can't stay there. Commissioner, you are presenting your new strategy for internal security, and I want to thank you because you are the voice of a Europe that is finally cognizant of the security issues. Now, just one word. Now, there's no security, internal security, without a real external strategy. Without protecting our borders, there will not be security in our countries tomorrow. And that means fighting illegal immigration, and that means all of our countries must cooperate. So no visas to any third states that do not take back their citizens that have illegally entered the EU. Mulhouse, the attack just a few days back, that attack was carried out by an illegal immigrant that Algeria 10 times refused to take back into the country, even though he had carried out crimes in our country. Now, there isn't a bit of powerlessness in Europe that worries our citizens. So loss of security for drug trafficking that saps the sovereignty of our countries, a strategy for the borders to fight terrorism. For all of this, internal security goes through our ability to guarantee that we will have a veritable external security strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Marike Ehlers, 1 minute.
Dank u wel, voorzitter, commissaris.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. We live in a time when threats are not just come from outside, but also from within. Security is more than a strategy. It's the right to feel at home in your own country, in your own city, in your own street. And I think the Vice President, Vance, is quite correct. Any security strategy, internal or external, will only succeed if we know why we need to protect ourselves, but also, above all, what we are protecting. And there, I think we've lost our way. We've lost our social cohesion, the warmth of our good neighbors, the confidence to keep our doors open and still feel safe, the feeling of caring for one another. That's disappearing. And I think it's time we find that feeling again. I would like to live in a country where my children can play safely outside, where they can grow up in a society that protects them, that makes them proud of who they are, of what they are. And without this foundation, it doesn't matter how many political security strategies we have, they'll be doomed to.
Thank you. Charlie Weimers, please.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner Brunner. Your predecessor, Ylva Johansson's internal security strategy failed. Migrant crime, bombings, shootings, and radical Islam is Europe's new normal. Across open borders, thieving gangs move freely, plundering Swedish farms and families. I therefore welcome your more pragmatic security-first approach that builds on strict border controls and increased returns of migrants. We need, and I'll say it slow so the left can scribble it down in their feelings journal, we need mass deportations. That's how we restore safety to our streets, and it's time for those who talk about safe streets to deliver. More community centers, social programs, and mass surveillance are the distractions of the left. They're banning ninja swords, but keeping the ninjas. Ignore them, and let's make Europe safe again.
Paldies. Vārds Javier.
Thank you. The next speaker is Javier Sarjalejos.
Gracias, señor presidente. Thank you, President. Commissioner, first and foremost, I'd like to begin by congratulating you for the presentation of this internal security strategy for the European Union. That means meeting a commitment that was made and in due course, and it means that we can define a strategy that is consistent and adequate with the nature and the severity of the threats that we face. A document that is not just an analysis, it is not just a roadmap. It is and must be an operative commitment that means that we can fight and make the progress that we need based on the impetus that the Commission is making. Now, we're not threatened just as individuals, but as systems of coexisting, and our democratic systems are under threat too. Now, you won't be surprised when I say that the key will be our ability to deliver. And on this point, I think it is fundamental that we strengthen those instruments that we have that are going to define our ability to actually deliver on the promises that we make. The Europol, Eurojust, the agencies Frontex, the AMLA, and the agencies that we have. We must make sure that they have enough funds via the MFF and improve anything that we need to in the bylaws that give them their remit. Now, there will be no easy solutions, but the European Parliament is here to cooperate.
Next speaker, Joachim Stanisław-Brudzinski. The floor is yours.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Yes, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the internal security of the member states means the security of the citizens in our countries, and what does it look like in practice? And I can give an example of my own country, Poland. We've seen that Ursula von der Leyen has delegated to Prime Minister Donald Tusk to undermine rule of law vis-à-vis law and justice in a spectacular way. Today, for example, temporary arrest of Mateusz Morawiecki, pre-trial arrest, and in handcuffs, people who arrested in front of their families, whether sick, in front of children, and the reason for this arrest was, not very clear. And the physiological needs are not being respected as well. So we have to, the idea is to get statements sometimes enforced. And over the recent days, we've seen that a very serious murder was released from prison, tried to arrest Kaczynski, threatened some of the workers in the office, and 3 days, he's been released 3 days after somebody from the office of Mr. Kaczynski's office. This is what Donald Tusk's government looks like.
Blue card from Dariusz Jonski. Yes,
Dziękuję.
No? Okay, thank you. Okay, next speaker, Paulo Cunha, for 1 minute, please.
President, Commissioner, the European internal security structure has threats that do not respect borders. We must act urgently with a European strategy that is renewed, robust, and consistent. We have 4 clear priorities for security: protecting external borders, strengthening cooperation, police and judicial, fighting terrorism, and digital security. These 4 priorities mean that we have to have a strong response to the threat that is consistently and quickly changing. It is crucial to strengthen the cooperation amongst member states. The external borders of the EU must be protected effectively, making sure that we have the technology and the human rights that are qualified to do this. Today, the EU must reiterate its position as a project of peace, maintaining the security of its citizens and promoting its values, but without giving in to the temptation to limit our freedoms. Today, more than ever, we need to have a European pact for security. Thank you.
Accept blue card from Mr. João Oliveira. Yes, please, you have a floor.
Thank you, President. Mr. Cunha, now we're talking about the internal security strategy. 2 questions. Would you accept to have a strategy that would stigmatize migrants' religion, but then closes its eyes to financial crime and the criminality on the far right? And the second question, do you think it is correct for a strategy to focus on European strategies, agencies, without looking at investment domestically in the domestic security services? Thank you very much. I would like a strategy that looks at a problem that exists. We cannot ignore the challenges that is visible to all. I believe that the Commissioner's approach is a pragmatic approach, and pragmatic approaches is the best way possible to look at migration issue. We know that migration routes must be approached so that we have a safe legal approach, and that's the only way that we will have favorable results in protecting the rights of migrants. Thank you.
Next speaker, Elena Donazzan, for 1 minute, please.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. There is a prey of ex-military officials stating that we are of faith and love. Save us, please. Europe no longer has faith or love and a major security issue. We must move beyond this hypocrisy and be clear-minded. The internal security strategy is a fundamental requirement. Weapons, but not only. Armies, yes. Armed forces, of course. Security goes beyond that. It applies to the citizens, the data of these citizens, the data of businesses. It has an impact on borders, land, sea, and even space. It impacts energy sources, water, raw materials, infrastructure that are strategic. It is a hybrid war, and we must be aware of this. To be prepared, we must have a paradigm shift and act for the defense of our sovereignty. First and foremost, that means industrial protection and personal liberty. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Maciej Wojcik, for 1 minute, please.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Yes, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're addressing the question as to why it is that Europeans feel less safe. Researchers found there are three main factors which cast a shadow on safety and security in Europe. First of all, migration and serious problems with integration. After 2015, millions of migrants have crossed the borders of the European Union. People in the streets are afraid for their safety, in particular after incidents such as those on New Year's Eve in Cologne, Germany, when there were over 1,200 attacks. And secondly, terrorism, whether it's in Paris, Berlin, Strasbourg, Nice, Brussels, mean that citizens are afraid to go out into public areas. Third of all, normal street crime. In 2023 in Paris, there were 10,000 armed robberies. Stockholm, 62 gang shootings and 300 rapes. So people are afraid to go out into the streets. They're paralyzed. So we need to effectively block illegal migration, strengthen the borders of Europe. The Migration Pact is not the response to the problems related to migration. It only transfers the problems of Western Europe to countries which are still safe, like Poland, Czechia, or Hungary. We have to withdraw from the pact and introduce swift and effective measures to protect our borders.
Vorbim aici despre securitate.
We are talking about a security for the defense of Europe, but it's not only about security, it's also about the transformation of our economy and political system in state capitalism. It would put military industry at its core. This is not an economic adjustment. We are building a war-based economy. War-based economies are not market economies. They're not democratic economies. This means strengthening the production of arms, monopolies. It means a public procurement system that's opaque, that's confidential. It means that legal and moral responsibilities are just put away. It means a constant urgency where measures are taken behind closed doors with the justification of security. Do we wish to redefine Europe based on arms and weapons? Are we willing to look towards a future focused on military strategy and not on economic prosperity? Security is essential, but it should not be at the cost of prosperity.
Procedure, and I have 7 speakers on my list, and I will start with Dariusz Joński. Floor is yours.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie przewodniczący.
Yes, thank you very much, President. Security in Europe is the slogan of the Polish presidency, and it doesn't only mean the security on our borders, but also internal security. So I'm very happy that the European Commission has prepared a very clear plan to fight organised crimes and gangs. And there are nearly 5,000 of these in the European Union. Anybody who enjoys our hospitality in European Union and carries out a brutal attack has to be deported. And this is how we approach this in Poland. And Donald Tusk's government has said there's zero tolerance for anybody who breaks the law while enjoying our hospitality. I'm glad to see that we're strengthening Frontex and that we're now going to have we're going to be more operative and we're going to have strengthened police forces to react. We do have to react. Security for Europe, security for all of us is the most important thing.
Thank you. Next speaker, José Cepeda.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you very much, President. Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to begin by congratulating you for this strategy for internal security. of the EU. But there's something that I'm concerned about that I'd like to share with you, sir, and with you, Vice President Virkunen. First is with the digital ecosystem. We've said, okay, we're going to include content from the platforms, remove it. This is excellent. But we need to be clear precisely how the ID of each platform is going to be verified and how the DSI will be enforced. You should be more blunt in this. And then we're talking about Rearm EU. We're talking about how will we define our security and our borders to the outside. The NINISO report put forth the idea of intelligence services for the security within the EU. It's important for that intelligence to be fully coordinated. This is one of the hugest challenges, no doubt, that we're going to have to work out in this work program. Thank you.
Next speaker, João Oliveira.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner Brunner, the European internal security strategy has priorities that are mistaken. And when it comes to the way it closes its eyes to money laundering, the hard right, and organized crime, there are four main points. The first, places focus on the agencies when we should have investment in our national law enforcement forces. The second is that it strengthens monitoring of people and restricts the freedoms of individuals, even violating their privacy. Third, when it comes to fighting financial and economic crime, that more should be done here. When it comes to capital and technological wherewithal. Fourth, it instrumentalizes the religion of immigrants, making them scapegoats of crime, and closes its eyes to the crime that comes from the hard right. This strategy will not guarantee internal security.
Speaker Sunčana Glavak.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. According to available data provided by Europol, on the territory of the European Union, there is 821 organized crime network dealing with trafficking in drugs, human beings, cyber criminal, and of course money laundering. This is why I welcome this initiative, because first and foremost it brings about an integrated work of security agencies and a deepened cooperation between Europol, Frontex and national agencies. What is especially important, we want to improve cybersecurity, bring about new technologies for the neutralization of cyber threats, and at the same time protect the digital infrastructure and our citizens' data. What is extremely important is a clearer control at the external borders of the European Union. Fight against disinformation has been talked about at great lengths for a number of years here, and this is also connected to media literacy of our younger citizens who are actually at the beginning of their lives. By way of conclusion, these measures are geared towards strengthening the resilience of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As a lawyer, I can only warn you, this security strategy, you are actually implementing the most fearful dictatorship and you are reinventing the Inquisition. I expect to hear Galileo Galilei say "Eppur si muove," because this is where we're at. The Inquisition lasted for 600 years and destroyed the entirety of mankind. You shouldn't accuse us of being the extreme right, because you are the extremists of the world and you have killed the European project. You have cancelled our right to have an opinion, to express our opinion and to think. If we don't think like you, we are social pariahs. This will lead to nothing. We have rights and liberties, fundamental rights and liberties that you should be respecting, because millions of people died to protect them. You are nothing but a dictatorship and we need to bring you down. Thank you.
Next speaker, Ana Miguel Pedro.
Commissioner congratulations for the strategy that you've presented to us today. It is a decisive step forward to face the reality we all see. Threats have no borders, and they are increasingly swift and smart and interconnected. We are fighting an explosive combination of organized crime, hybrid of threats. But let's be frank. When it comes to a strategy, criminals have are very quick to react. And in member states, what we can see that's crucial, if we continue to share information more quickly than we do, Europe will lose the battle before it has even begun. Commissioner, the strategy is a unique opportunity to correct the errors of the past and show that Europe is up to responding to the threats that it faces.
Very much. Next speaker, Lukas Ziepel.
The threats from our internal security problems are real. The sabotage, Islamist terrorism, left, right-wing terrorism, election manipulation, this strategy recognizes that. However, if we want to have European security, then we need European solutions, and that means having Europol with the possibility of carrying out investigation. We need a way of protecting critical infrastructure. We have to have nets. We have to have interlocking databases, but we also need to defend freedom while we defend our security. We cannot have mass surveillance. We can't criminalize encryption. Security is not a pretense for destroying fundamental rights. It's a reason for protecting them. So we have to have a security based on fundamental rights, a EU that can defend itself and not lose its soul.
So closing KGI procedure, and I would like to ask to take floor for the Commission Vice President Virkkunen. Floor is yours.
Mr. President, honourable members, thank you very much for this debate. Commissioner Brunner and I have been listening very carefully what you all have said here. And I think it's very encouraging to hear that in this House there seems to be broad agreement that we need to change in our approach to security. And this is also, as we know, it's something that EU citizens also expect from us. According to the latest Eurobarometer, 64% of EU citizens expressed concerns about the EU's security. Europe has long been a beacon of freedom, security and prosperity, grounded in the rule of law, democracy and shared values. But in today's rapidly evolving world, our security landscape has changed. The threats we are facing today, they are larger, they are more global, and also increasingly they are online. Ranging from organised crime and terrorism to hybrid threats fueled with disinformation, fear and sabotage to our critical infrastructures. So it's clear that no member state can tackle these threats alone. We need a bold, proactive and also coordinated European response. The European Internal Security Strategy is this response, together with the White Paper of the Future of Defence and the Preparedness Union Strategy. We are now setting together the vision for safe, secure and more resilient European Union. Security is also a precondition for our democracy. Our security will be further strengthened by upcoming Democracy Shield, which will also lay out a comprehensive framework to protect and promote democracy in the European Union. We do not start from scratch. Our work will build on the existing vast European internal security architecture, with many achievements already in place. We will reinforce partnership with the third countries contributing to global security. We will also make the EU more secure by reinforcing our capabilities, leveraging technology, enhancing cybersecurity and combating security threats decisively. I cannot stress enough the online dimension of security. Combating hateful, criminal and radical online content is a top priority for us. So it's ensuring lawful access to data while preserving privacy and cybersecurity. Here I want to underline especially the need to protect our children online. We need a new legal framework on protecting children from sexual abuse online. I count on the co-legislators to advance the negotiations here very swiftly. And we will put forward also new initiatives to protect children from radicalization, online recruitment of gangs, and cyberbullying and other serious threats. Resilience is at the heart of all our security measures. We need a change of mindset towards a whole of society approach where each citizen, civil society, businesses and academia feel engaged and empowered. As President Niinistö said in his report, security is a public good. We all need to protect it together.
Thank you, Executive Vice President Virkkunen, and thank you, Commissioner Brunner, for being on this debate. Debate is closed on this point in agenda.
Colleagues, now the next item on the agenda, Commission statement, EU Preparedness Union Strategy.
And as soon as Commissioner Labib is ready to take floor is yours. You can take it, yeah. Thank you.
Mr. President, honorable members, it's a pleasure to speak to you about a topic that concerns all of us. Preparedness to keeping our societies working and our citizens safe under any circumstance. Today's existing and emerging threats facing Europe are many, complex, and they are frequently connected. That is why our preparedness strategy is based on an all-hazards approach, from natural disasters to man-made disasters and hybrid threats, which can often take unpredictable forms. It is a fact that no one can deny. Every year, more and more extreme weather disasters are striking our communities with tragic consequences, and they are happening with greater intensity than ever before. Flash floods, wildfires, heat waves, at the same time, the phones we carry on our pockets, our computers, social media, electrical grids, financial institutions, supply chains and raw materials are also vulnerable. No country can face these massive challenges alone. This is today's reality. So we must face it in an orderly manner with collective responsibility and solidarity. And we must pay particular attention to our most vulnerable citizens, children, the elderly, people with disabilities, and all those who are often the first victims in times of crisis. Honourable members, the bottom line is we must be ready for anything, even the unexpected. We must be able to maintain the vital services of our democratic societies, children going to school, hospitals delivering care, governments and parliaments continuing to fulfill their responsibilities no matter what happens. For that, we must take a holistic approach. Our reinforced preparedness cannot rely on isolated silos. It has to be systematic, coordinated and integrated different areas. It must also be proactive to anticipate risks and challenges. Now, you may ask yourself, is this the role of the European Union? And the answer is yes. Our people want it. Last year's Eurobarometer survey shows that more than 6 out of 10 Europeans say they need more information to prepare for disasters. And more than 8 out of 10 Europeans believe the EU should be more involved in preparedness efforts for future crises. Honourable members, as Commissioner for Preparedness and Crisis Management, I have been endorsed by our President to work with Executive President Menza to present a preparedness strategy to help keep people safe, prepared and informed. I take this responsibility very seriously. This is not about preparing for war or alarming our citizens, quite the opposite. It's about raising awareness and preparing our people in an active manner. It's about working together with our member states, our political representatives, our partners, the private sector and our citizens to build trust and responsibility. That's what our citizens expect. And that's the promise of our union, a project of peace and prosperity. And to keep our promises, we are preparing. We must reach all our citizens. We will leave no one behind. That's why, since the start of my mandate, I have visited countries around Europe. I have multiplied exchanges with ministers of interiors on security. I have visited different emergency centers and civil protection services from across Europe and around the world to exchange on lessons learned and best practices. The EU preparedness strategy is the result of all of this and is built on the Nielsen report by the previous president of Finland, with whom I had an extensive exchange as well. The EU is now taking concrete action to keep Europeans safe. Last week, we launched our Preparedness Union strategy. This is one of the first 100-day initiatives of the Commission's mandate. It is concrete, it is targeted and operational. This strategy of preparedness and readiness is based on three principles. First, an all-hazard approach. This means taking an integrated and comprehensive approach to full range of natural and human-induced threats and their cascading effects across sectors. Second, we are taking a whole-of-government approach. This ensures that authorities at every level contribute and now their role in an emergency at local, regional, national and EU level. Preparedness lies primarily with the member states' competences. This strategy will make us more coordinated and efficient in supporting our member states with an additional layer of protection. And third, we are taking a whole-of-society approach. Everyone on board, citizens, businesses, media and civil society. Everyone doing their part to keep their family, friends, workers and communities safe. Our preparedness strategy set out 30 clear and concrete key actions. I will briefly focus on 6 of them for the sake of time. First, we are strengthening our emergency response. The Coordination Centre, ERCC, and setting up an EU Crisis Coordination Hub. We are breaking down silos to be more coordinated and more comprehensive. It will support coordination across sectors during a crisis, not just for civil protection, but across Commission services to address the spillover effects of today's complex crisis in areas like health and energy, for instance. Second, we are beefing up our Union Civil Protection Mechanism, the UCPM, which quickly coordinates aid, mobilizes emergency teams and delivers life-saving assistance when floods, wildfires and other disasters strike. And our member states are using it more and more. Requests for assistance have gone up by over 10 times since it started in the early 2000s. This shows the value of this shield of protection. And third, We are making for full use of Europe's Copernicus and Galileo satellite systems. Copernicus provides Earth observation to help anticipate and reduce the impact of disasters like floods, wildfires, and earthquakes. In fact, just like last week, Copernicus was activated after the devastating earthquake in Myanmar. And the upcoming Galileo Emergency Warning Satellite Service will enable national civil protection authorities to send alert messages directly to our European citizens. Fourth, we are strengthening our ability to protect our critical infrastructure and services to keep our societies running during emergencies, to make sure that food and water continue to be available, and hospitals, ports, airports, energy supplies, and digital services continue to function even under very extreme conditions. Fifth, we are boosting our rescue strategic reserves for when national competence capacities are stretched. Rescue includes stockpiles of vital medical, energy and shelter equipment and specialized capacities for chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear threats. Just last week in France, I visited a strategic rescue stocks with CBRN countermeasures and other equipment like emergency resuscitation equipment. And finally, sixth, we are strengthening our civil-military cooperation so investment can benefit civilians, and military civilian services and infrastructure play a key role in supporting the military during emergencies. We are also getting more young people involved in building a new culture of preparedness programs like Erasmus+, and the European Solidarity Corps will help create a new generation aware, trained and ready to act in an emergency. To conclude, honourable members, this is once in a generation moment for the safety of Europe. Strengthening our preparedness will be a key part of this. Your support in the Parliament will be essential for our success. You are part of the whole of government approach as an institution and all citizens' approach because you are their voice. So when we are prepared together, we are safer together. Now it's time to get to work and to put all of this into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Commissioner. And now the floor goes.
Madam Commissioner, Sie haben das gerade den
You have just had this once-in-a-generation moment. Now, if we look at the development history of the EU, it emerges out of the ruins of the Second World War. And so for that reason, security was so important. We were very successful. We have our single market. We have so that's why the economic aspect is very strong. And so we now need to restore competitiveness. And now we have to have security for one another. Freedom and stability, very important. And it's clear in the last months that this can't be taken for granted. So preparedness strategy is an expression of this. So I thank you very much, Madam Commissioner, for this contribution to the strategy, and your strategy, in fact. Let me mention 3 building blocks, which among, of course, very important, but very much the fundament of the strategy. First of all, having stockpiling and exchange of information. All of the relevant actors with the agencies and Justice of Home Affairs all have to be working together to have a risk assessment at the European level. We need this common evaluation also to be clear to the population. We have to make this very clear, and we have to raise consciousness without alarming the citizens. It's very important. The citizens have to be able to follow along during the crisis and emerge more resilient. We also have to have solidarity. Why can't we have Erasmus for catastrophe management? So, and also we have to ensure that the civilian and military cooperation work together when we are able to train together. And let me conclude with 3 requests. Please take your own security seriously. Be ambitious. We need courage. Also, to the Commission, please include the Parliament, not just in the development of the strategy and the threat assessment, but also as a body who can communicate to our citizens, answer questions, and please, all actors and agencies have to be working together and say, whole of government, all threats, this will all bind us together. It's not a time for Europe to move forward with courage and determination.
Thank you very much indeed. Go ahead, Mr. Maniatis.
Ο κόσμος μας γίνεται όλο και λιγότερο ασφαλής. Thank you very much. The world is no longer a secure place. Climate change is making natural disasters a more current affair. In Greece, we're seeing this. So we're very happy to see this new preparedness strategy for the Union, but to reinforce our resilience, we need to protect society. We need to work in the public and private spheres, and the member states have to work with a strategy based on European strategies for civilian protection. We need to have risk assessment of a joint nature, and we need to have national reports on these issues as well. The solidarity clause under Article 22 and mutual assistance under 42C need to be applied as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Vanacci, please go ahead.
C'è un tedesco.
Now, German, Frenchman, Belgian, Italian. Now, you'd think that was the beginning of a joke, but unfortunately it's not. We've got von der Leyen, Macron, Labib and Draghi. So basically the same people who have propelled us into a deep-seated crisis now telling us what we should be doing to get out of that crisis. Now, first of all, we had e-vehicles, then we had sanctions, the kind of sanctions that we should have had the Kremlin quaking in their boots, and now we are supposed to be rearming, and this is the way we survive, apparently. But Labib, this is a pretty hefty backpack, everything you're stuffing in there. I mean, you can tell that you've never actually carried one, and you're telling us that, we're supposed to be running to get away from our attackers, often rapists, all too often illegal migrants who are here, and people who are shivering in the cold. I mean, that's your responsibility as well because of energy crisis. And then other people who are living in clandestine circumstances and people who are dying in Greece, Italy and elsewhere. And now you are telling people they should have this survival kit, but you don't really know what you should be doing with it. If you really want to do something good for Europe, then basically you should get out of the way, you should disappear, you should be starting to run. That might be worthwhile. Thank you, Ms. Sidlow. No, there is no blue card in actual fact, so go ahead.
Madam President, Commissioner, I listened very closely to you, Madam. You talked especially about crisis management in the wake of natural disasters. But the document which you published on preparedness is much broader, and so I hope you will forgive me for concentrating on the other dimension. Firstly, Perhaps as a result of my experience as Polish Prime Minister, I have some reservations as to EU-wide central crisis management is the best possible idea. Of course, we need support, solidarity and cooperation. That is beyond doubt. On the other hand, in a crisis situation, you have to act fast. Decisions have to be taken in the here and now. I fear that the bureaucratic wheels will turn too slowly. Secondly, and very briefly, Madam President, there is a thin line between supporting and defending a democratic process and interfering in that process in individual member states. It's a very thin line indeed. And we've seen over the microphone is cut off.
Thank you very much. Speaking time is limited, as you all well know. Mr. Leone.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Commissioner Labib, ladies and gentlemen, last week you presented a strategy to prepare the European Union, and I think it's worthy of congratulations. As a fire officer, it's one of the first times that people I meet on the street are saying that actually Europe is trying to get its house in order, bearing in mind that some people here in the room do share this idea of having preparedness. Last December, like we heard from Ursula von der Leyen's Commission, to encourage volunteers to work in civil protection. Madame Labib, I trust you so that in the coming months there'll be a text fleshed out that will address this issue of volunteering so that we can defend civil protection. Yes, we need a clear legal set of parameters to prepare our union.
Solidarity and commitment must guide our actions toward a more secure, cohesive and resilient Europe. Merci.
Grazie. Thank you very much. And now, Ms. Riba-Ichiner. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President and Commissioner. Now, preparing Europe for the crises looming on the horizon is a necessity, not an option. But it comes as a bit of a surprise that out of all the challenges on the security front, the Commission has decided to focus its attention on a survival kit. Now, this kit was mooted in a report to this Parliament over a year ago, and why it is resurfacing now. I mean, I think that the real reason is that people are trying to create a climate of insecurity and an urgency to get us to invest in arms. But do you want to talk about security? Absolutely. Let's talk about security then. Let's talk about energy security. We're going to require massive investment in renewables because otherwise we'll continue to be dependent on Russia, United States or Qatar. What about digital security? 90% of our companies depend on services offered by Amazon, Microsoft or Google, and all of the major social networks that we use are owned by American techno-oligarchs. So what we actually need is to incentivize European technologies and networks. And then let's talk about food security, because we are reducing our security by virtue of these free trade agreements, which are going to doom our primary sector. And we should not make our citizens responsible for this by then asking them to buy one of these survival kits. Thank you very much. Ms. Miranda, point of order. Point of order. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. I would like to make a point of order. I'd like to respond to what the person 2 speakers ago talked about, and I would like to draw your attention to the rules of procedure of this Parliament, which say that members of Parliament should not use offensive language. Now, talking about migrants being rapists, I really do think from an ethical point of view is something which would merit such a point of order. That is offensive language. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Miranda. I actually agree with you. It is most important the debates within this House remain civil and in a climate of respect. So thank you very much indeed for making that point. Now, Ms. Kilonen.
Kiitoksia, rouva puhemies.
Thank you, Madam President. Security can never be taken for granted. It requires continuous work early on. The EU preparedness strategy contains specific actions which can be used to strengthen Europe's security. But a strategy alone is not enough. You have to take a broad view of security. It's not just about military defense. It is like a marathon with no end of challenges. It requires a long-term approach and enough money. Otherwise, plans just remain on paper. It's all very well to have documents and strategy, whether they're about military matters, security or preparedness. They have to be threaded together and part of a package. We need to see them turn into specific actions which will really strengthen the EU's structures. That is the way we can take a holistic approach to Europe's security.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Essen, Wasser, Nahrung.
Food, water, heating. This is what we call prepping or common sense. Citizens who prepare for serious situations were accused by you and derided as being those who are predicting the end of the world. And now suddenly you are predicting exactly what people were trying to propose last year about conspiracy theories. It's not about serious preparation for serious crises. You're playing fast and loose with the politics of fear. You want to scare citizens into allowing your policies and a legal agenda to be approved with awareness campaigns for EU Preparedness Day, putting this in the curriculum, and the language you use are actually making the exception the rule in what you're normalizing the case of panic. And panic citizens, of course, are much easier to control, aren't they? Above all, you're distracting citizens from what? Reducing the quality of life, reducing currency power, reducing people's quality of life. But I'm sure the citizens will thank you for this one day.
Well, once again, I should remind members that they must use respectful language, respectful towards the Commissioner as well as respectful to all colleagues here in this chamber. Yes, we can criticise one another, but let's seek to be respectful of one another. Mr. Mandel, please go ahead. Yes, thank you very much indeed, Madam President. Well, my Italian is just good enough to be able to agree with what you just said, Madam President, and thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Madam Commissioner. Dear colleagues, it is indeed important that we invest in civil protection in Europe, particularly now, and it is also important that the incoming European Commission focus on the economy and on security. We know that there is an interplay between the two. Part of security, of course, is civil protection and looking at those who take responsibility for others, because we don't engage in civil protection just for our own benefit. It is not a selfish exercise, rather to benefit everyone in our society as well as future generations. And that is why it is so very important to invest as of now. Now, in the previous Parliament, we negotiated the disaster protection mechanism, and we have already seen it bear fruit, dealing with widespread forest fires in Europe when countries came together to deal with the aftermath of these natural disasters. And it is equally important that we do so now. And I set great store by this, Madam Commissioner. It's important that we think along the lines of subsidiarity. In Austria, for example, we've got our volunteer fire services, and we've got professional single army, but we've got so many people who work together. But let's ensure that we operate on the basis of subsidiarity so that we can carry out our civil protection and make sure that we don't centralize too much, but make sure that we develop our civil protection outfits at local level. That's the right way forward, to my mind. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Mr. Clergeau.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Commissioner, I entirely share your political priorities. We must prepare for all risks. We must mobilize all levels of government and all of society. We need a new common risk culture based on solidarity and cohesion. There are many of us here wanting something of you, and that is to safeguard the status of voluntary associations, especially firemen. I noticed that our counterparts from the extreme right have nothing to say about the volunteer firemen. We support you in the idea of preparedness by design, to prepare society for crises using all the civil protection apparatus that we have. A budget for this, a budget for Rescue EU, a budget for all of these strategies that they work and that they work for our citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Bai.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, the European Union once again is trying to put itself as being able to withstand crises. The Union strategy is to be better prepared, trying to bolster participation, improve resilience in our services. In any case, if I may, Commissioner, it's not through using quite silly videos that we're going to actually efficiently protect the people of Europe. The strategy sets in train a rapid reaction approach, which is good, but these strategies, once again, are undermining the sovereignty of the states. It's imperative that any preparatory action, maybe I can give you some advice on this, should take into consideration the diversity that we share, where each country should be in charge of its preparedness and preparation. There are many in this chamber who have professional lives that are affected by this, and I can assure you that the rule of law in member states works very well, contrary to what the previous speaker said. In France, we have a civil security and protection system that we want to keep in place, including with voluntary firefighters.
Thank you very much, Ms. Donatson. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. Fight Club, it's a film you'll be familiar with, and there were all of the reassuring ways of getting out of a crisis. But this is what you are saying, Madam Commissioner, but with the greatest respect, you using reassuring words and pictures, peace and prosperity, whereas at the same time telling people that they should have a survival kit in their backpacks. Now, this is not reassuring if you actually look at the degree of unpreparedness in Europe. And you have quoted the Finnish model, which is obviously something which stretches from the armed forces to the ordinary citizens, and it's an extremely serious endeavour. So certainly we are unprepared for preparedness. Thank you very much, Ms. Eriksson.
President, Commissioner, natural disasters, pandemics, cyber attacks, hybrid attacks, these are all examples of what we need to be prepared for, what might happen. And preparedness is about thinking ahead and making sure that the equipment that we need is put in place to deal with different sorts of crises. The citizens have a key role here, not just governments and the European Parliament or the EU, but citizens as well. And that's why it's important that citizens reflect on how you would react if there is a power cut because there's a storm or a hybrid attack. What happens if water no longer comes out of your tap? We in Renew want to make sure that all households in Europe would have a preparedness guide so that people can think through things, because then you feel safer. President Niinistö's report is a very good report. I'd like to congratulate the Commission on having taken it into account. This preparedness strategy is going in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Niinistö, please.
Arvoisa puheenjohtaja.
Madam President, a country with well-educated people, where they look after nature, where people are equal, where there is no discrimination. That is a country that people want to defend, even militarily. So a preparedness strategy is about recognizing that society is worth defending, is resilient. Vladimir Putin finds democracy a threat because it gives us a voice. I want to thank the Commission for taking this holistic approach. Some on the right think it is now time to invest in defense and the military. And we say, yes, it's true, but that's not enough. We also have to educate people, make society resilient, ready for crises. People need to have media literacy and feel that they are equal and worth it.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Martins.
Obrigada, Sra. Presidente.
Thank you very much, President, Madam Commissioner. I consider this survival video as a bit of a joke. It's just a strategy to convince citizens that war is inevitable. For 20 years, the war machine and industry has justified this with the mass invasion of Iraq, and now Europe is meant to arm itself. The European Union has the second biggest military expenditure at this time and is the biggest exporter of arms around the world. It's only the US that comes before them in that league table, and all because we're playing into the hands of Musk and Putin. Billions of people are suffering from climate disasters which are going to kill them. And now the Commission wants to postpone the climate goals. We're stuck in the twin transition. We're stuck between Russia, the US, and China when it comes to pharmaceuticals. The active ingredients are produced in China, and we cannot start spending on weapons the money that we should be investing in other areas. Many people need pharmaceuticals, not every other day, but every day.
Just a minute, l'onorevole Strada, prego.
Ms. Strada, please. Point of order.
Grazie mille, Presidente. Volevo tornare un
Thank you very much indeed. I would just like to return to what Mr. Vanacci said now. Above and beyond, I would echo what our colleague said, but I should also note that the aggressive tone towards Ms. Habib is unacceptable. So I would like you to point that out, because I think this was something that we all interpreted as being a threat, all of those listening to what he said, and we should not be issuing threats to commissioners here in this chamber, really not in this House. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Strada. Well, we have already invited Mr. Vanacci and all colleagues to make sure that their language towards the Commissioner is respectful indeed towards everyone in this House. Sometimes members go too far. Now, Mr. Papadakis, you have the floor.
Επιδίδεστε σε ανέξοδα λογίδρια για την ειρήνη και...
Your words are based on peace, we have, however, arms being sent to Ukraine which will only further propagate war. We also have aggression towards Russia and China, as well as vis-à-vis the United States within NATO. And all of this really has to do with the divvying up of profits between multinationals. And at the same time, ordinary people are suffering, their wages are being cut, and their working hours are increasing. And this climate of fear is then used as a pretext to essentially get citizens exactly where you want them. You want the people to support European Union policies, but we have anti-social budgets, and we do not agree with this imperialist policy.
We have a blue card for you from Oliveria, Onorevole Oliveria. Please.
Obrigado, Presidente. Thank you very much, President. So I'd like to put a question to you. Would you agree with the decision of the Commission to take the role of the national member states and the public services as secondary in nature when it comes to natural disasters affecting public infrastructure? Do you agree that the European Commission should consider this disaster protection being the responsibility of the individual citizen, or should it not be the public sector structures that play an important role here?
Νομίζουμε ότι το σημαντικό είναι ότι η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση
The European Union is planning for the digital transition as well as the green transition, but that has not had any beneficial effects. And now there's all this talk of war, which is just being deployed to multiply the profits of multinationals and big groups. So we should resist this trend. Mr. Sokol is next.
Madam President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, the pandemic has shown weaknesses of the European Union when it comes to preparedness for the crisis. At the beginning of 2020, there was a chaos. Restrictions were made when it comes to the flow of critical materials among member states, which jeopardized the criterion of solidarity, which is a core value of the European Union. We are faced with new geopolitical circumstances, and we need a coordinated response to the crisis. Energy security, the critical materials are core elements of the strategy for the resilience of the Union. I'm happy that health is one of the priorities of the European Union. The Act on Critical Medicines is very important in this respect. The elements that has not been regulated by this law is stockpiling of critical medicines in case of shortage of medicines. So I'm happy to see that in this document there is a need for stockpiling critical medicines. We need to have European stock in order to make sure that the medications most needed by the Europeans are available and not trot in warehouses. I hope that we will be more organized and efficient in addressing future crises. Thank you.
Ms. Fritzon.
Fru talman.
Madam President, where thousands, tens of thousands of children have been kidnapped. And behind every statistic, there's a child with a name and a history, a child whose dreams have been crushed, A resilient union, therefore, has to be prepared to deal with more than just sabotage and cyber threats. Our preparedness needs to protect lives. It needs to make sure that those who are risking the most are not left alone. That's why we need to strengthen preparedness on all levels. At EU level, but down to the local society, civil society as well, to make sure that there's genuine security. That can only be provided together with everybody pitching in to protect everybody. Thank you, Ms. Bonte.
Thank you, Voorzitter.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I'm sure all of us have seen this video that Ms. Labib presented her preparedness strategy with. Now you're going to have citizens lying awake at night, but the Commission doesn't understand anything. Every day, citizens are being presented with the terrible impact of mass migration, social tensions, shootings, and even bombings that have become reality in many European towns and cities. But according to the Commissioner, preparedness in Brussels means having a radio in your handbag. All that's missing is toilet paper. How ridiculous, how estranged from reality. If you're taking the metro in Brussels, people laugh at me, people intimidate me. None of what you've said is going to help me at all. It's time that you start looking at what's going on in reality rather than turning away from it and deal with the real problems. It's Axinia now.
Strategia Uniunii Europene pentru pregătirea populației în situații de
The EU preparedness strategy is useful. The world is more and more insecure. On the other hand, some of the actions need to be rethought. For example, we should not be creating panic, and we should not give the impression that we're preparing for war. Secondly, it seems the EU is encouraging an institutional militarization. We had authoritarian excesses and abuses during the pandemic already. Thirdly, we've seen with Pfizergate that there's no transparency in the Commission. It is not a good idea to try to rush these things through. And then finally, it's tragicomic that the EU is setting up yet more institutions and bureaucracy.
A blue card for you. Perez, Honorable Perez? No?
Mr. Perez, no. It's been refused.
Honorable Loiseau.
Ms. Loiseau, you have the floor.
Vous devez toujours être prêt. Assurez-vous de regarder les choses sous tous les angles.
You should always be ready, and you'll be in trouble if you're not. And it is not you who have said this, Madam Commissioner, it was Benjamin Franklin. And if he were still alive together, then his words would be even more prescient, because we've just experienced a pandemic. We've seen a return of war in Europe. Our democracies are under attack, and we're only starting to see the beginnings of climate deregulation. And it is nothing worse than reacting to a crisis. I don't think we have yet learned sufficiently that we need to prevent crises, and that is going to mean that we need to be far-sighted and that we need to pull together. And as long as our authorities are distant, and if our states fail to include citizens in these efforts at prevention, and as long as we remain characterized by what divides us rather from what brings us together. Our societies will be under threat when we encounter extreme conditions. But our citizens expect more from us. They want us to respond to situations, but they also want to do their bit. So we are able to rally everyone. If we are able to deploy solutions at local as well as European level, then we will be able to safeguard our most cherished values, the freedom and the future of our children.
Ms. Schilling, you have the floor.
Liebe Kolleginnen, liebe
Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner, standing here before you makes me think of those villages that were swept away, destroyed, houses destroyed, lives. And yes, this is the prime time to talk about this strategy, to talk about the strategy that we need to forge together to deal with these crises in Europe, because natural disasters respect no national borders. At the same time, being prepared also means appraising risks. We can prevent things. For example, the worst impact of the climate crisis could be averted if we don't meet the 1.5 degree increase. If we don't limit that, we'll see more catastrophes, disasters, more houses will be destroyed, more people will be affected. You talked about the children. The children are a vulnerable group, especially in crisis times, especially when it comes to natural disasters. So let us take that to spur us on and address this today, to work for a strategy both for today and for tomorrow.
Flanagan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flanagan.
Thank you. Commissioner, you spoke about anticipating risk. We should have anticipated the risk when we made ourselves dependent on Vladimir Putin for energy and fertiliser. We should now anticipate the risk in leaving ourselves 85% dependent on the US for soya imports. What looked like a stable relationship with the US is now in tatters. But we're not learning, quite the opposite. Through Mercosur, we are now slowly but surely going to make ourselves dependent on them for beef. Is it anticipating risk depending our future on President Milei? In a crisis, in a war, during a massive climate event, there will not be the case that the current policy will keep us safe. You said in your own video, we may end up hungry, you could end up very hungry. With the way the EU policy is going, you will end up hungry. So we've got to change the direction we're going.
Grazie, onorevole Salini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salini.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. The logic of preparedness is one of the reasons the European Union exists, and that also applies to the military realm. So we're certainly on the right path. And we also need to look at the most serious crises which are looming, such as war. And at all times, we need to coordinate. And obviously, we have strategic autonomy for all individual countries, but we often criticize the European Union because we don't have a shared or joint response. So either that criticism is an alibi, it's a pretext to continue to divide the European Union, or else we should perhaps ensure that our criticism is more constructive and make sure that we return to the origins of the European Union from both the civil and military perspectives.
Ms. Corrado.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. I'm a climate activist, and it's perfectly clear to me that being prepared is important to deal with crises. It's not enough, especially because of the irresponsible propaganda coming from the negationist right. But at the moment, there's been too little talk of earthquakes, fires and floods, and too much about the survival kit to survive 72 hours of military attacks. It's a very dangerous game to play if you say claiming that people who talk about war are fanning people's fears. But it's sacrosanct and true that we need to invest in prevention and defend crisis management culture. But if we're going to have a survival kit, in mind, I'd have one that would be able to deal with crises, which would involve a healthcare system that's well functioning and working with climate civil protection systems, strategic autonomy, clean energy at low cost without being held hostage to fossil fuel producing countries, decent work, well paid, and the most important thing, I'm concluding that despite the urgency in my survival kit, I'd have democracy, but not for 72 hours, but for the coming 72 generations at least. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Giraldo Vidal.
Gracias. Ustedes.
Thank you very much. You are the aristocracy of the bureaucracy, and you're telling us that we should be prepared of all kinds of different disasters. This apocalyptic vision and wars and alleged foreign interference is designed to keep us in a perpetual state of fear, whereas we actually know what you want. You want to turn the exception into the rule. What is unusual, turn it into normality. And this is extremely dangerous, but it is likely to be the consequence of your policies. It might be a coincidence, or it might be a calculation. Now, we've got the Green Deal, and that means we've had a lack of investment in our military policy for many years now. So you are trying to control the narrative when in actual fact this is ultimately your fault, and you are interfering in our democracies, and you are simply sweeping out of the running any candidates whom you do not like.
Blue card for you. No? No. Mi spiace, collega Ion.
Sorry, Ms. Yon.
Onorevole De...
Now, Mr. Dvorak.
Przewodnicząca, pani komisarz, szanowni państwo.
Madam President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, the polls have shown resilience many times in the past. The populations of member states play a crucial role in reacting to threats. This happened with the floods in Lower Silesia. Thousands of Poles are involved in territorial defense set up by law and justice. So while preparedness is all well and good, does the European Commission know how to build resilience in Poland or in Finland? Is Brussels the right place to make decisions? The strategy provides a diagnosis for the problem, but it fails to deliver the right medicine.
Thank you. Mr. Pascual de la Parte.
Muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Madam Commissioner. I think that the strategy that the EU is mooting should be part and parcel of a wider strategy. We need a classic defense as well as civil protection, preparedness for conflicts, as well as natural disasters and all kinds of unforeseen events. Basically, we have to prepare for these eventualities. It's far cheaper than having to deal with the consequences thereof and clear up. That would end up being far more expensive. And what this means is that we're going to require more civilian and military cooperation, as well as more private operators to safeguard critical infrastructure and make sure that they can respond to threats as well as the manipulation of information. Essentially, we've got to tell society that the culture of defence is for everyone, and we've all got to be prepared.
Thank you. Ms. Pajin.
Comisarias, el proceso...
Commissioners, the process of globalisation has widened the concept of security, going far beyond the purely military and rather has become multidimensional. This is what Javier Solana said more than 20 years ago when he was High Representative. And today, the European Union has experienced devastating natural disasters as well as a pandemic, cyber attacks as well as threats to our democracies, along with military threats. And so we need to now bring about a shift in our mindset. We need to anticipate and we need to be better prepared. But above and beyond that, in a time of global threats, exactly what does preparedness mean? It means that we need to discern exactly where the real threats come from, particularly those that others deny, and make sure that we build capacity, that we coordinate our military and civilian efforts, and that we have proper governance, particularly at local level, and most importantly, that we create a civilian consciousness of how to respond. We need to do that now. We need also the tools to communicate effectively and to fight disinformation.
Thank you. Mr. Tonin.
Drage kolegice, komisarka, mir je seveda.
Colleagues, Commissioner, all of us want peace. Sometimes we take it for granted. And sometimes when we need it most, it seems out of reach. It is the basis on which everything else is built, the economy, healthcare, education, and so on. Quite clearly, the Rearm EU initiative and the internal security strategy show that it cannot be taken for granted. And now we have the preparedness strategy to enable our societies to prepare for future crises. MEPs have set up a resilience and civil protection group, and this is a guarantee that Europe will be better prepared for crises in future.
Mr. Kramer.
Or several dozen liters of drinking water. Keep a 72-hour supply of canned food. Have torches ready and know your nearest shelter. Colleagues, to many these instructions might sound like a bad joke, especially on April Fool's Day. But unfortunately, they're not. They reflect a growing need to prepare for the many threats we are facing today. From Russian aggression to natural disasters, from hybrid warfare to future pandemics. Europe must be prepared, and so must every European. But let's be clear, being prepared does not mean being fearful. On the contrary, preparedness should give us peace of mind and courage. And most importantly, preparedness is not just the job of a household or a family, it's a whole of society effort. Because real resilience comes from strong communities, knowing whom to call, where to turn, and how to help one another in the case of crisis. That's why social cohesion and civil society, sports clubs, unions, churches and associations must be at the heart of our preparedness strategy. True preparedness isn't what we store in our basement. True preparedness is the strength of the connections we build above ground. Thank you very much.
Grazie, onorevole Negrescu.
Thank you. Mr. Negrescu.
Doamna comisar, stimați colegi, când au loc incidente.
Commissioner, colleagues, fires, floods, medical crises, everyone appreciates help from the EU. Hence, we need to prepare the EU for crises. We need concrete, measurable actions applicable to all member states. The European Parliament has adopted a plan for a joint medical response force for Europe. We have a civil protection mechanism budget. Unfortunately, the Commission did not put in place the measures that the Parliament wanted. We need to catch up. We never know where the next crisis is coming from. And being prepared does not mean sowing panic. People want information and solutions, and we need to offer solutions without any ambiguity.
Thank you, Mr. Negrescu. Now, Mr. Andriukaitis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear Commissioner, a resilient Europe is not built through force. It is built through trust and is based on a long-lasting, holistic approach. We must embed civil-military public health cooperation with the public health workforce as a strategic bridge between institutions, citizens, and armed forces. By empowering people, by investing in citizens-led resilience hubs, we will achieve whole-of-society resilience and co-create local responses. Preparedness must start long before the military is called. The goal is civilian deterrence, building such strong public health system that threats are absorbed, not amplified. We must train law enforcement and the military in public health so they support, not replace it. And we must stop ignoring non-communicable diseases and mental health, which silently erode resilience every day. They are not secondary. They are core security threats. Europe must act now by investing in prevention and in public health system as our first line of defense. I welcome such strategy. Thank you.
Grazie, passiamo ora al catch the...
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Catch the Eye. We have a list of a number of colleagues who want to take the floor. Unfortunately, we can't take into consideration all of them, but we'll start with Mr. Sousa Silva. Go ahead.
Senhora Presidente, Senhora Comissária,
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, we'd like to welcome the presentation of the EU strategy on disaster protection. This is an important approach to strengthen the EU's capacities to deal with preparedness and crisis management. Citizens are the first resource for a resilient society. We have to raise awareness amongst civilians and citizens and set in place early warning systems, and that's what needs to be on various governance levels. We have to highlight public-private partnerships and civil-military cooperation. These are essential pillars in the age of conflict, which is characterized by instability and cyber attacks. We have to have a genuine disaster protection mechanism in the EU, and the EU has to play a coordinating role. But it's also important that the member states and the local authorities assume their responsibility as well. Disaster protection constitutes a task of everybody for everybody.
Comisaria Lavib, estar preparadas ante...
Commissioner, being prepared for a pandemic or a natural disaster is far more than having an energy bar in your backpack. So, let's not be frivolous. We need to use common sense, and we need to make sure our people know that, yes, we need to safeguard the peace and prosperity of the European Union in these turbulent and hostile times, the most turbulent in recent years. And we also need to raise awareness as well as teach our citizens about the risks and attacks they face, but at the same time learn the lessons from the COVID pandemic and obviously invest more in European security. In the wider sense of the term, the climate emergency, food security, military security, but also digital security. We have an epidemic of mental health crises, particularly amongst young people. We've got to prepare for the worst, hope for the best. We need more solidarity and more Europe.
Prego.
Ms. Miranda Paz.
Muito obrigada, Presidenta. O clima político mudou a tambores de guerra.
The climate has changed. And there's a war footing. And there's war propaganda coming out of Brussels. We need survival kits for public services, and yet we need affordable food and affordable medicines. A 72-hour survival kit is part of strategic communication and manipulation of the public. Mrs. von der Leyen wants to prepare Europe for investing billions in defense. A sense of urgency is being created to justify future decisions in the field of defense and security. It's Project Fear.
Presidente. Thank you, President. Commissioner, I don't agree with anything, really, that the Commission's doing to face the massive challenge. In my survival kit, I'd have international humanitarian aid, which is under attack every day, not just by Putin, but another example is the Netanyahu government. International agreements should be in that survival kit. The Ottawa and Oslo Accords, the ones countering anti-personnel mine production, and we should be defending those. Disarmament should be in the survival kit, not armament, and also massive tax on windfall tax on those arms industries that are making massive amounts of money. Of course, the absence of war is not peace necessarily. There takes more to that as well. And one thing is important. We're seeing collective pushbacks of migrants as well. So, Commissioner, I'm extremely worried because in the name of security, we're reducing the protection of rights of our citizens. We're undermining our laws, and that means there might not be a great lot left to defend. Thank you, Mr. Lopez Aguilar.
Presidente. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. Commissioner Labib, a strategy for European preparedness which allows us to boost our capacity to respond to threats is something which we doubtless need. But there are all kinds of threats, natural disasters, climate change, and the like, humanitarian disasters as well. Might also be talking about armed attacks, cyber security attacks, or even geopolitical crises. We have all kinds of imminent threats. But above all, this is going to need anticipation. We need to be able to deploy our civilian, public and private forces. Now, but we don't need to create a climate of fear, because fear is the fuel of populism and regressive ideologies, and it's going to sap the soul of the European Union. So what we actually need is effective communication so we can prepare for the worst. Thank you.
Obrigado, Presidente. Senhora Comissária Labib.
Mr. Oliveira. Madam President, Commissioner Labib, this so-called discussion about civilian protection is really avoiding the whole point and is really singing the praises of war. The Commission wants to replace the national member states and public sector and say it's up to the individual citizens to prepare themselves for this sort of crisis. And there are justifications which are worrying about infrastructure, for example. The Commission is sowing fear because fear manipulates the population so they accept what they normally would reject and things that would normally be against their interest. Maybe I can tell you that in order to produce weapons, you have to produce enemies. In order to produce enemies, you have to produce ghosts and fears. You want to sow fears and produce these ghosts to scare people who don't accept these warlike attempts.
Έτοιμοι για 72 ώρες να έχουμε σπίρτα, φακούς και κονσέρβες. Γιατί? Για να είμαστε, λέει...
Storing food to be able to survive wars and pandemics. What you're doing is terrorizing people and accepting the militarization of Europe. Your policies have led to the climate crisis, the energy crisis, the health crisis. You've abandoned doctors. You're cutting pensions and salaries, and you want to use Europeans' savings to fund your military projects. You want us to be ready. But what we really need is a Europe of peoples, a Europe of democracy, transparency and social justice. That would guarantee peace.
Thank you. Now to reply on behalf of the Commission, Commissioner Labib. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you very much for these frank and engaging insights on these very important topics. Being prepared is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity to keep our families, our communities safe. And no country, no one can do it alone. We need to do it together. Our Preparedness Union strategy is a strong step towards a safer, a stronger Europe. We have the tools and the strategy to confront today's most complex threats, but we also need the courage and the political will. And we will need trust. Trust is the superglue holding all this together. Trust between people and government, trust between member states, and trust between Europe and its partners. This preparedness strategy is a systematic, coordinated and proactive approach to make sure every European citizen is ready for any crisis. We are building a Europe that is safer, stronger and ready for today and for whatever comes next. The European Parliament definitely has a role to play and can engage our citizens and create awareness without provoking anxiety, but on the contrary, promoting inclusivity. What people fear is being caught off guard. Our citizens, furthermore, want to be involved. We are then considering the integration of preparedness training in EU youth programs such as Solidarity Corps and Erasmus+, to promote resilience and participation in democratic life and civic engagement. Because indeed, and I will switch to French, you are totally right when you say, vous avez tout à fait raison quand vous dites que les pompiers et les volontaires.
You're right when you're saying that the firemen and volunteers are a huge resource in our resilience preparedness. And of course, we consider that they are already part and parcel of that resilience.
Have already talked about this initiative, about Erasmus Plus on preparedness, or in our Solidarity Corps with Commissioner Glenn Mikalev. And I also tasted this idea during my dialogue with young European citizens, youth dialogue, and it was very well received in a very enthusiastic way. And I would like also to underline that the preparedness strategy is part of an umbrella. We now have a triplet with the white paper on defense, readiness 2030, the preparedness strategy, and the internal security strategy that was presented just today. And we will have also the democratic shield coming soon. And shortly, we will also present an EU stockpiling strategy and a medical countermeasures stockpiling strategy to complete the protection of our citizens and of our societies, but also of our democracies. So real resilience comes from strong societies and comes from a strong European Union. When we are all together prepared, we are stronger and safer together. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the colleagues who took part in the debate. Special thanks to Commissioner Labib for having listened so patiently to some of the excesses. But that now concludes the debate. The next item on the agenda is Council and Commission statements on improving the implementation of cohesion policy through the mid-term review to achieve a robust cohesion policy post-2027. First of all, on behalf of the Council, I call the Minister for the European Union, Adam Schlocker.